And welcome to the Go Earn It podcast. I'm your host, Shane Sparks. It is episode number 9, and we are with the guy today that has done a whole lot of winning. Going off of memory, Mark, I'm going to do my best. 6-time high school state champion, 3-time Big Ten champion, 3-time NCAA finalist, NCAA champion, 2-time junior world medalist, cadet world, or 2-time junior world champion, cadet world champion. Other than that, you really didn't have a whole lot of success.
You nailed it, man. You did a good job. You got him.
Well, thank you much, Mark. Super excited for the time to talk some wrestling with you. Your perspective is so interesting because you've pretty much done it all. You were born in Davison, Michigan, correct?
Correct.
Tell me about Davison, Michigan at that time. Of course, it's a powerhouse with legendary coach Roy Hall. Tell me about growing up in Davison and how you were introduced to wrestling.
I started wrestling when I was 4. My dad and my brother wrestled, and so I was going to practice with my brother at the time, and just kind of got into it by osmosis, pretty much. And yeah, Davison was, and honestly still is, a pretty dang good wrestling town. The likes of Brett Metcalf, John Reeder, Paul Donahoe, Trevor Perry, a lot of hammers, Division I hammers were coming out of that town, and it made it really easy for me having a team to look up to, having good guys to look up to, and see what it takes to do a lot of things that people don't get to do that much. So yeah, I had it all. I had everything I needed as a kid in wrestling to accomplish the things that I wanted to accomplish.
Do you remember those guys as a kid? Any of those studs?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They're all good dudes, man. They're all good dudes, and that's the thing about a lot of sports is you get to know them as athletes just from watching them, and I'm fortunate that I've gotten to know a lot of these really good wrestlers throughout time, and I've gotten to know them personally, which is pretty cool. Most of them are all pretty good guys to know, and are good connections to have.
You mentioned Brett Metcalf. I was reading that you had his brother Chase. He was one of your coaches.
Yeah.
So you and him were obviously super close. What was it like? Obviously, I mean, you were young. I mean, do you remember, the tragedy and how you were able to overcome that?
Yeah, it was terrible. I remember being in school. I think it was in 3rd grade at the time, 3rd or 4th grade. And yeah, it sucked. I I, I mean the relationship we had was after Chase would come in and do a lot of our practices, and after, and he was, man, he was good, and anyone who knows Chase will tell you, like, he was skillfully up there with Brent. He's Brent's older brother, and skillfully he was right there. And the relationship we had was after practice. Sometimes Chase would come inside and play video games with me, play Madden with me, because my wrestling club was right outside of was in my backyard. And that's where all the practices and stuff that I was doing, most of them were right in my backyard, which I'm pretty fortunate for. But yeah, it'd be cool. Right after practice, right after private or something, he would come in, play some video games with us, maybe eat dinner with us one time, a couple times. But he's a good dude.
If you could have another conversation with him, what would it be about?
Um, it'd probably be reminiscent. I think we had a lot of good memories at that time, and if I could have a conversation with them, it'd be things like, dang, I've came this far, but remember when we were just in the living room just hanging out, man, me and you, remember you know teaching me how to shoot with both hands. I could, but by the way, like, I could not shoot with both hands to save my life. I'm a right-handed person, but learning how to wrestle with my left hand was nearly impossible. and it took me a long time to get it, but he helped me a lot through it. Just little things like that are things that people would probably look over in a relationship, and those are the things that I cherish.
Well, I'm sure he'd be super proud of you, no doubt. Tell me
Thank
about
you.
your dad. I mean, I know of your dad. I've met your dad, but tell me about your dad.
Mm-hmm. My dad is he's a the he's a jack of all trades, I would say. He he does a lot. He works a lot. Um, he's retired, but he still gets up and works every day. He's someone that usually when people ask me how my dad's doing, I tell them he's doing well. He doesn't know how to have a bad day. He's up and moving. He'll be 68, 69 this year in September. And he's a dog. He works hard. He has a very good work ethic, and um, also he's a quiet guy, but when he talks, I listen. He's a very good dad, and he's given me everything I've ever needed. So I got nothing to complain about him.
When you started wrestling as a 4-year-old, did you start going to all the tournaments right out of the gate, or what was the level of competition as far as how active you were as a young kid?
Yeah, my dad would take me around. He'd take me around to tournaments at that age. I think the age groups of tournaments started at 5, 6, if I can remember right, at like 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. So for the most part, when I started, I was wrestling. I was wrestling older kids, but it I don't know. My parents have always been on the side of uh like experience. That time and experience is the most important thing. So and honestly, it didn't really matter too much as long as I went to these tournaments and wrestled hard and did things like as the best that I could. There was never any problems, even if I lost. But if I was going to these tournaments and giving up and not wrestling hard, which did happen, or throwing fits or anything like that, of that matter, not good, not good. Not
Do
good.
you ever remember a story, Mark, in particular, where it wasn't such a good day for whatever reason?
We were at Michigan State. I think I was probably 7 or 8, 6, 7 or 8, and this is I've never been a like a I mean, my mom will tell you too, like, honestly, I've never been like a whiny kid. I don't complain a lot. And after I had lost one of my matches, I remember throwing my headgear, and my dad ended up like saying something to me, but not before my mom did. She was at that tournament and she saw me throw my headgear, and that's probably like top 3 times I've seen my mom mad, like, ever, about anything. My sisters, we have a hectic family for sure, but a loving family nonetheless, and that's probably like top 3 most mad I've ever seen her.
What's your
Yeah,
mom's name?
Melissa,
Melissa.
Melissa
And you
Warren.
have how many brothers and sisters?
I have 2 sisters and 1 brother, and I'm the youngest
Okay,
of
okay,
4. Yeah.
man. So
So
when
yeah.
you were a young kid, because I'm always fascinated about how often kids compete. Now I know every kid is different. Did you love it? I mean, did you love it as a kid?
Yeah, I loved it, man. I'm dude, I went everywhere for wrestling. I also played football and soccer. And I mean, I never left the state for football or soccer. Wrestling, I was around the country. I loved it. I
Okay.
love competing. Yeah.
As a young kid, what was your favorite event? And you got like a favorite memory from like, first grade to middle school, one that stands out.
Probably the Tulsa tournaments which are always tough. They're like, I think I've maybe won those tournaments maybe once. Those tournaments were always tough. And then like having that experience of being able to win that thing finally was awesome. But my favorite tournament that I won a few times was probably Tournament of Champions in Columbus, Ohio. They always had it at the a convention center, and that tournament was different. They would do 1 3 minute period, and you'd start the match on your feet. And if you got say I got a takedown in like 15 20 seconds, I only got about 15 20 seconds on top to turn somebody. If I didn't turn it, we were back up. And so it it developed, I guess it developed skills and like being able to make things happen quickly. It's 1 3 minute period. Once the 3 minute period's over, the match is over. That was a really fun tournament too. I won that one a couple times.
Who are some of the kids you remember wrestling? Like, I'm sure you wrestled a bunch of, guys that became hammers. When you were like a little kid, did you wrestle any eventual studs?
Me and Zahid used to go at it all the time.
No
He
kidding,
actually,
that long ago.
yeah, yeah. I think the first time I wrestled him, I was probably 6 or 7, and then I never beat Zahid until college. College was my first time beating him.
So you and him go back like 20 years ago on a wrestling match.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Man, are you guys like, I mean, I know you guys have been competing forever. Are you guys like friends? You've trained with them, you've been on teams with them. I mean, what's that relationship like?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've been on junior world teams together. We're friendly. It's just tough. Like he's always taken things that I wanted, and then in college, I got one thing that he wanted, at the time, and so it's tough. But we're not mean to each other.
Sure.
We're friendly. So him, let's see. People I remember seeing was like Dean Heil, Jimmy Gulabon. I wrestled at a tournament. He whooped my butt. He's a little older than me, and this was at North Allegheny, and I wrestled like an exhibition match against him, and I'm pretty sure we did 3 1 minute periods, and he beat me 10-0. So, like for people who don't know, like wrestling a lot, 10 points in 3 1 minute periods for it is a lot. I got scored a lot.
It's cool to know, like, even a guy like Mark Hall had some matches that didn't always go the way you wanted them to.
Yeah. Let's see. So and then let's see. Jason and Chenzo. I never wrestled, but the kids in my club always used to wrestle. Yeah, man. I mean, a lot of times, like I look back and I used to do this in college too with my teammates, but like we'd look back and go find like old brackets and kids who used to be in them, kids who were pretty dang good and aren't wrestling in college. Just it's crazy how many different directions people can go.
In 7th grade, you moved to Kentucky. What went into that decision? That's a big move.
Yeah. I didn't have much to do with the idea. I mean, obviously I was worried about school and Pokemon probably and wrestling, and my dad had came home one day and kind of offered the idea up, and at first I'm sure it seemed crazy and wild, and we when we ended up doing it, we lived in a motorhome outside of a church parking lot. On and we lived right next to the school where I went to school. So I lived across the street in a motorhome out of a church parking lot.
And you're in 7th grade, and you make the state finals. And you and I were talking about this before we started to record. You make the state finals against the guy He's a senior going for a second state title. You're in 7th grade, so you're like, what, 12, 13 years old?
13, yeah.
What do you remember from that state final?
Oh man, it was cool. My dad was in my corner. I remember that. I remember it was a packed house. Kentucky likes their wrestling. Um, and I remember being in a couple positions and wrestling the dude, and I could feel like I could definitely feel how much stronger he was than me. I do remember that. I remember him being a meaner dude. He's definitely meaner than I was, which is something I had to learn over time that I just didn't have at that age. Uh, and I also remember after the match, after I had lost, just giving my dad a hug. I remember wrestling my butt off, but just not being enough. Um, Guy just got me.
And what was his name?
Myron Bradbury.
And you had wrestled him a few times that season, correct?
Correct. I wrestled him 3 times in whole, like all together. The first time he beat me 9-7. That was at like a preseason tournament, and then I beat him in overtime at the end of the season before the postseason, and then we wrestled again at state, and he got me. I think it was 4-3, 5-3, maybe.
Have you seen him since?
I think he ended a period on top.
Okay.
What's that?
Have you seen him since?
No, no, haven't laid
Man,
eyes
I
on
mean,
him
if,
since.
if I'm that guy, I got that wall chart like in my living room, like right in the living room. So everybody can say, oh man, Mark, I didn't even realize that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you said something interesting, Mark. You said a couple of things that really stood out to me in that question. You gave your dad a hug. I don't proclaim to know you well, but I would say this. I mean, when I think about really good guys that again, from my perspective, appear to be pretty laid back, you would come to mind. Losing, it didn't happen often for you. It never did, but it seems like, I mean, were you always just give the best effort and move on quickly? I mean, how did you deal with losing at a young age? And has that been pretty consistent throughout your career?
Yeah. Yeah. Wrestling has definitely been a effort based uh an effort based sport for me. And I mean all that means is like I've don't get me wrong, I've came off the mat and been disappointed. I've came off the mat and cried and not liked some outcomes. I've won. There's been matches that I've won and not been appreciative of the outcome. And all that is just like, am I wrestling hard? Am I doing the things that I need, that I know that I can do in the manner that I know that I can do them? And, if I can look back at wrestling matches and look back at, uh, times that I've won, times that I've lost, big moments, and I can truly see that I like did things the best that I could, and whether it worked out for me or not, that's one thing that I realized, going into college. I realized now that like that's all that was important to my dad in wrestling. And the times that I like laid down and put my head on the mat, and times that I maybe gave up takedowns prematurely, um, just wasn't wrestling hard. Those were the times that my dad would be upset with me and let me know about it. But if for the most part, if I was wrestling hard and extending scrambles and trying to get off the bottom, trying to turn people, that was another thing like that a lot of people that is looked over by a lot of people is like top wrestling. You know, we always, if I wasn't cutting you, I was trying to turn you. I was never just like, if I was just laying on top of you to ride you, my dad would let me know about it. So, just those skills, all those skills they've developed just because I wrestled hard and I wanted to get better in all phases.
Growing up, Mark, what were the most critical aspects of your training that, looking back at it all these years later, like, man, this was super, super critical that I did this? What would you say to that?
I would say it'd be my partners, having the partners that I had. I've always had hammers for partners. Throughout kids club, middle school, high school, I've always been in good environments for wrestling. And I think, anybody could anybody could say that. Anybody can say that they've been around good partners, but I also think like I've been around like-minded partners, like partners who want the same thing that I want, partners who want to be state champions, like I wanted to be a state champion, partners who wanted to be national champions, just like I wanted to be a national champion. And even if they weren't my size, like being around those kind of people is what made it fun for me and made like my dreams attainable. If I saw my partners doing it, I knew I could do it because I was in the same room as them. I was doing the same things as them. And like that's one thing I'm definitely most thankful for is the people around me.
I want to touch more on that in just a second. Before I forget, I want to make sure I ask you another thing you said before is you had to learn how to get mean. Speak more to that.
Yeah, just like being meaner, and all that means is just like not being like being a bully, you know, clubbing instead of just like laying my hand up on somebody, giving them like a good little smack, instead of just like running, like grabbing a crossface, like getting that freaking crossface and putting my forearm in their face and right under their nose and being a bully. That's the type of like getting mean kind of things. If someone shoots on you, like not just like reaching over top of them and grab them, like shoving their face in the mat, getting my legs back. And, that's a big difference. And when you're 12 years old, 13 years old, wrestling a guy who's 17, 18 years old, those make big differences, So that's what I would say about getting mean. It took me a while to learn those things.
Who's the meanest teammate you ever had? Like, who's the guy that things you're talking about, you're like, that guy was such a badass? Who comes to mind?
Probably in college, I would say Bo Nickel. But he's not a mean person. He wrestles hard and it shows. He actually, I learned some things from him. One of the things that I learned from him was like when you put someone on their back when you're drilling, you keep them on their back until they get off. Like, even if you're drilling, like say we just start practice and I like double you to your back, I don't just let you off your back. You got to fight off your back. So that's one of those like mean things that actually is really helpful when you think about it, because if you're drilling is a big like repetition thing. However you drill is the way you're probably going to wrestle. And so if you wrestle and you put people on their back and you let your weight off of them immediately and you let them roll off, you're going to get really used to doing that in a match, in competition. And so when I first got to Penn State and wrestled with Bo a couple of times, he would put me on my back and I'd just lay there for a second and he'd be like, fight off your back. And I'd be like, oh, okay. And he'd let me like bridge and get off my back, obviously. But, if I just laid there, he was going to lay on top of me.
I didn't wrestle at a high level, Mark, not anywhere close to where you did, of course, like most of us. But when I look back, and I haven't wrestled for 30 years, but I still think about it. I was thinking like, man, if I could go back and do it again, I never realized the importance of drilling. It just never hit me. And
Yeah.
and this stuff is so interesting to me. What was the mindset? Because when you go into those rooms that you were in, even from a drilling standpoint, I think a lot of people think like drilling, it's loose, it's practice. But what you're telling me is no, you better have a mindset. You better have intention. It better be intentional on what you're doing. What was your thought process? You're heading into a practice at Penn State. What is your thought process like leading up to a practice and going into a good drill session?
Yeah. Yeah. It took me a couple weeks. I think that's another thing about me is I'm a quick learner and I implement things quickly. And one of the things that I learned was how to drill, and I learned that pretty fast. And what makes drilling difficult is like drilling can be harder than live if you're doing it right. It can be harder. It can be the hardest thing if you're doing it right. And one thing that I learned or a couple of things that I learned was putting people on their back, keep them on their back, not giving up like an easy go behind, like not just like letting someone snap you down and run around you, like make them change directions at least once or twice. And then the other one is like getting up, like just stand up after you're like get taken down. That's like a big pet peeve of mine is if I'm drilling with somebody and between each takedown they just like sit on their knees, they fix their socks every single time. Maybe like once or twice is fine, but like every time they just sit down there, fix their socks, and I'm up on my feet ready to go. Like there's nothing worse than that. And one of the things we used to say in college, which is really funny, is uh, break them in the drill. And all that is just like just drilling hard. And so by the time you get to live, the other guy's really tired and they don't wrestle as hard as they would if they weren't really tired. So I broke them when we were drilling.
Man, that is great. That is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Drilling takes a lot of like focus, and you want to do things right, obviously, and not rush, but also like yeah, it takes a lot of focus to do things right and have some hustle. People like that. Good
Putting you
people.
you on the spot a little bit, Mark. Who's the best drill partner you ever had?
Chenzo.
Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. Chenzo. From the time I pulled my red shirt in college to the time to the last tournament we wrestled, which is Big Tens, we warmed up every match. Even if he was wrestling or I wasn't wrestling, like we warmed up every match before every match. So like to lose weight, we would hit a couple shots and stuff before we went out. Like before we went out, like we were back to back, which is cool. Like when he was getting ready, I was getting ready. He was my.
I know you guys are tight. What's something about Vincenzo Joseph that you admired most or just were in awe of? What stands out when I say that name? What do you think of?
I mean, you tell before we had started, and you were kind of letting me know that I was like a relaxed, chill dude. Well, Chenzo is like, I think he's like a level up for me. He's like, the thing I admire about him most is how like his perspective on life. He's got a really good like perspective on life. He sees things for what they are, not for what he wants them to be or what someone like. He doesn't look at perspective for things like just because it's important to you doesn't mean it has to be important to him, or he understands just because it's important to him doesn't mean it has to be important to you, kind of thing. And that's one thing I really appreciate about him that I think not a lot of people know, and then the people who do know him, I think that could go overlooked. And so we got a really good relationship, and I've seen that in him.
Good stuff. Backing up a little bit, going back to your younger days, you go to Apple Valley, Minnesota. You go to Kentucky, you're there for the year. Then you go to Apple Valley, and you win 6 state titles, and you win 6 team titles. We're not going to go through every year, but that's like a whole lot of winning. Like, I mean, how would you sum up that 6-year period?
I mean, just wild. It's cool to think about. It's cool to know that it happened. I think at the time it was just about like I had really good coaches and really good mentors, and at the time it was. I mean, I wanted to do that. I wanted to win 6 state titles, but it was always just about doing it one at a time. When I was on one, I couldn't win my 6th. I could only win my 2nd. When I was on my 2nd, I couldn't win my 6th. I had to win my 3rd. And so I just had a really good support system and people around me. And yeah, it's freaking cool. Only dude in Minnesota to ever do it.
Yeah, that is cool. Incredible. There had to be some pressure. It comes with it. How did you deal with the pressure and the nerves at that time? And what was most beneficial?
I had more pressure on me like earlier on in my high school career, so like 7th, 8th, 9th grade, were times that I really felt like I really felt those matches of like, don't lose these. I can lose any of them during the season, but when it comes to the postseason, do not lose these ones. You know what I mean? Like, so those kind of things. But as I got older, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, I would say I was so not that I was so far beyond everybody. That's not what I'm getting at, but like I was so confident in myself. Like at that time I was wrestling, I had wrestled with national team members. I'd wrestled at the Olympic Training Center for a summer. And not only that, but like snuck takedowns and like gotten in those type of situations with really good like otherworldly wrestlers, And so by that 10th, 11th, 12th grade time, I was just like I was so far in front of where I thought I was gonna be at that I really stopped feeling that pressure and was just allowed to just go and wrestle freely. Not to say people still wouldn't give me pretty good matches. Like I can't recall any matches, but I can recall not just beating everybody up. I had to. That's the thing about wrestling is like they want it too, and no matter how much better I was than them, like that wasn't going to stop them from wrestling me hard. They want it to. They want to win too. I'm not the only one that wants to win. So that's one thing. That's one kind of like situation that I remember from like dealing with that pressure.
What's your favorite memory of wrestling in the Apple Valley singlet, whatever it might be?
I have a lot of them. We just had such good teams. We did some pretty cool things. I mean, winning the Clash, which is coming up this weekend. That's a pretty tough tournament. We won that a couple times. Being on teams with guys like Gable and Seth Gross. I mean, those are just the ones that everybody probably knows, but I had some awesome teammates and friends on those teams that people probably don't know as like household names. I would say memory wise, it was probably like coolest match was 7th grade year when I won the semis. That was pretty cool. I was losing 5-0 and came back and won. And then like my favorite tournament every year was the Christmas tournament in Rochester, Minnesota. It's like a Minnesota state tournament, but there's no divisions. All the hammers are all in one bracket. And so that tournament was always really fun.
What do you remember from the night winning number 6?
Mm-hmm. Uh it was cool. It was cool. I remember getting off the mat, hugging our one of our coaches. His name's Jamel Tidwell, and then getting over to another one of our coaches. His name's Bobby Ginther. He has he has Down syndrome, and he was down on the mat, down in that like mat area with me. Gave him a big hug. He was one of my good buddies in high school, and hugging my parents. And then Shane, you should have, man, if you were there and you saw the line of people, like the line of autographs that I signed and pictures that I took, it was, I mean, so we wrestled at the XL Energy Center, which is where the Minnesota Wild play hockey. And this line started, I was all the way at the bottom with some friends, all the way at the bottom, and this line took up the entire section up, like on the stairs. It was so long that it was disruptive, and security had to come and like stop it. But by that time, it was already almost over. But it was like looking at people right next to me, and then looking up and seeing like, oh my goodness, am I gonna really do this? And I did as many as I could before security came down. But yeah, that was really cool seeing all those people and all the autographs and pictures that I took that night was
That is
irreplaceable.
awesome.
Mhm.
Where did you go on visits in the recruiting process?
I went to let's see, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio State, Penn State, and Arizona State.
Okay. Why Penn State?
I ended up choosing Penn State just because of I really liked the area, and as much as I like love wrestling and wanted to go to college for wrestling, obviously, I wanted to pick a place like as much as I could without the wrestling bias, like as much as I could. All those universities were great universities, and honestly, a sleeper pick that a lot of people don't really know is like I love Madison, Wisconsin. Love it.
And that was
Like
with
it's
with Donnie and Jared, right? Pritzloff and Freyer. Were they the assistants under Barry at that time?
I think so.
Okay.
Them. No. I think it was Kyle Rochelle and Trevor Branford.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. And
So
obviously you had
yeah.
the connection with Rochelle from Kentucky.
Yep.
Yeah, those
Yep.
guys are great. Okay. So
So
Wisconsin
yeah.
was a sleeper.
Yes. A lot of people don't know that. And I
Okay.
love Madison, Wisconsin. I love Kyle Rochelle and the Rochelle family and Trevor Brandvold, two good coaches of mine, good people that I know. And so, but it ended up just being Penn State just because I mean the wrestling was a plus, but man, I love State College. It's a really cool college town. They love sports there. Um, and it was just a really good experience.
What do you remember from the night they pulled your red shirt in Iowa City?
Uh, so leading up to that point, we had to wrestle off. So like I knew it was gonna happen leading up to it. Uh, I was super excited. I was like, I was super excited. One, but two, I didn't really know like what I was what I was getting myself into, talking it over with Coach Kale. I just remember him telling me just, you know, go out there and wrestle. Go out there and do what you know how to do and have fun and just wrestle hard. And we'll talk about whatever happens after. And uh it was just it was a really good match. I remember how fast I got tired, how much energy I expended quickly. If I could wrestle that match again, I wouldn't. I think I ended up riding him for like a minute and a half after a takedown. And if I could wrestle it again, I wouldn't ride him for that long. That's just one of those like things you'll learn like going through college wrestling is like you get your riding time sooner or later. But if you just like are squeezing and sap yourself trying to get it all in one go, you get tired pretty quick. And that's one thing that definitely happened to me. Um, but yeah, it was a really cool experience. And I remember wrestling in that and wrestling at Iowa and uh how tired I was. And then coming off the mat and Coach Kell was just like, you'll never be that tired again. So don't ever fear being tired because it won't be like that ever again. And it never was. That match, like I came off the mat and I was like hands and knees from how tired I was. And I don't know if that was, I mean, that was partially how hard Alex Meyer wrestled, but also just like Carver Hawkeye and how tough of a spot that is to wrestle in. Yeah, it was a cool experience. I'm happy I did it. I'd do it again.
You obviously figured it out. You won the national title that year.
Mhm.
What was most important in that very first year, true freshman year? You win the national title, runner up in the Big Tens, if I recall. What do you remember from that journey? And obviously you had some ups and downs and figured it out in the end. But when you reflect on that season, what comes to mind?
What comes to mind is like is my true like overcoming a lot of fear. I mean, one of the things that I was fearful of was people who were like good top wrestlers, and that was a big difference in some like matches that I wrestled my freshman year to matches that I wrestled after that was I mean, one was Bo Jordan. He was a hammer on top. He's a really, really good wrestler. And in the Big Tens, I chose neutral. And like looking back, it was just because I was scared of how good he was on top, and I didn't have a lot of confidence in how good I was on bottom and being able to get away from anybody. And so Big Tens, I chose neutral, and 2 weeks later, wrestled in the NCAA finals. Uh, I'm pretty sure I didn't even look to my corner. I just chose down. Like, and usually I'm like a big like corner guy. I always look to my coaches like, where are we going here? And at the Big Tens, I remember looking over and Coach Kale was wanting me to go down. I was like that, like scared. And national finals, it was my choice. I was like this. I didn't even look at him. And really from that point on, I just chose bottom. I wouldn't look. If it was my choice in the second period, I went down. If it was my choice in the third period, I went down. I was going down, and I think that's one thing that I'm trying like as hard as I can as a coach to get that confidence into my kids is like you can go down, you can get away. Who cares how good this guy is? You're good, you know. So um, that, and I think also one thing that I learned was uh, just how freaking mean you got to be. Like college wrestling is not easy. It's so hard. It's one of the most demanding college sports. I'll put it up with anybody with any sport. It don't matter. College wrestling is tough. I'm glad I went through it.
Standing atop the podium as a national champion, when you hear your name called as a national champion, what are you thinking about on the top of the podium?
Um, I was thankful. I remember you kind of run back through the year, like the season. Like you said, I had some lumps. I overcame a lot of things. I lost when I was in red shirt. to to CJ Brucky from Central Michigan. Um, just like I remember just like standing up there and being like, dang, a couple months ago, like I did not think this was attainable. A couple months ago, I was second at the Michigan State Open, um, trying to like figure out if I was gonna be a bust, essentially, you know. Uh, and my coaches just were confident in me. I listened. I did what they told me to do, and by the end of the year, that was a really big, um, like a culmination of all the lessons that I learned throughout the year.
That's crazy. I mean, just dealing with the, thinking that you're going to maybe be a bust. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how did you, and obviously now you're coaching. I mean, the mind is everything. I mean, if you had to go back, Mark, and give yourself some advice heading into Penn State, what would you have told yourself?
I would like, if I was to speak to 18, 19-year-old me, I would just let them know how, and this is what we did a really good job of at Penn State, was how important I am as a person and my actions are, and also how uh how much magic and how much like good things will happen wrestling by just wrestling hard, like not laying on my stomach, not giving up takedowns easy, preparation, preparing right, uh like a lot of good things will happen when you do all those other little things. But I think I think I think those are really important. That it took me a few months starting out to really like figure those things out. I still had some bad habits from high school that I had to get rid of.
What loss was the hardest for you to deal with in your career?
Uh, Probably my junior year, losing in the NCAA finals. Uh, uh, what made that tough was like my sophomore year losing in the NCAA finals sucked too, but honestly, I just got my butt kicked and I lost. It is what it is. Like I did not, I didn't deserve to win, and uh, and I'm like comfortable saying that because I did get my butt kicked, and that's what happens. My junior year, I was wrestling Zahid again, and I was just wrestling. Like I was wrestling a good match, and for anyone who knows wrestling, they know Zahid's a really good competitor. And I was at the time I was wrestling him probably the best I had ever wrestled him. You know, we had wrestled a couple times throughout college, and or a few times throughout college, and I he's really hard to wrestle. He's like really good. He's long. He has a lot of leverage. He knows he's in great shape. He wrestles hard. And so I was wrestling as well as I could, pretty dang hard, and I still ended up losing. And that's a part of wrestling that is tough. Is like you can be you can be wrestling as good as you want, as good as you are. Uh, you can do everything right. You can do everything right and still lose. And so that was one of those matches where I really felt like I was doing a good job. I was in my stance. I was moving my feet. I was wrestling hard, and it just didn't go my way.
How did
That's
you get
one that
past
really
it?
stings.
How'd you get past it?
Um, it's at the end of the day, it is just a wrestling match, and I think that's one thing that helps me is not giving, like wrestling isn't my god. Like wrestling isn't, I don't worship wrestling. I am thankful that I get to wrestle and I get to do these things that not everybody gets to do. And there are people my age. I just read this book. Uh, I just read this book called Four Walls. by I think his last name's Scanlon. I'm blanking on his first name, but it's one of my buddies, and he was 20 something, and he got diagnosed with leukemia twice, and so he beat it, and then he went into remission, and it happened again, and those type of situations, like, they give me a lot of perspective on how thankful I am that I get to wrestle and I'm healthy. And but also at the same time, like, I was that match, I was over it by the end of the night. Like, because of that, because of knowing it's just wrestling and it's something I get to do. It's not something I am.
Last question for you, because I could talk to you, Mark, for another 3 days straight. I mean, you got so much wisdom.
Thank you.
If you could take a trip cross country, you and 3 other people, dead or alive, people you've met, people you don't know, who would you take that trip with, and why you picking them?
Yeah. I would go to, I've been to a lot of places, but I've never been to some of these like honeymoony spots, like, like Bora Bora or like the Bahamas, Jamaica, like a beach spot. So I think I'd pick something like that to go to. And I'd probably just take my friends, man. I'd pick 3 of my friends. I'd probably pick It's hard to pick because I think I have about 4 or 5 best friends, like dudes from the team that I just really love and are really good friends of mine. So, but if I could pick 3 of them, I'd pick Luke Gardner, Joey Bloomer, and
Good
Chenzo
deal.
Joseph. Be my 3 dudes I pick. I mean, it's probably like I could probably pick some celebrities or whatever, but if I was to do something like that, I'd want to experience it with my friends.
Let me
I
ask
wouldn't
you
want
this: if you had to go with 3 people you never met, who would you pick?
Okay. Now, if I have to do it with people I've never met, I would pick hmm, I'd pick uh J- I'd pick Travis Kelsey because he's a Eagle. Good dude. I know if I'm around him, like, he doesn't seem like a troubling guy. He's a really good dude and probably one of the Eagles, like, uh
Is that
he
Jason you're talking about? Is it Jason Kelsey, the offensive
or
line?
Jason Kelsey,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
He could be like Walter Payton Man of the Year kind of guy. Really
Sure.
good dude. Him, and then heck, I'll stick with some Philly athletes. I'd also pick Devontae Smith. I
The
like him
Slim
a lot.
Reaper.
The Slim Reaper. I have a T-shirt. It's a white T-shirt, and it has a Grim Reaper with an eagle's like cape on.
He's a stud. He's a stud.
Yep. And then lastly, I would pick. Oh, I got this poster. I wish I could turn around and show you, but I got a Allen Iverson poster. I pick Allen Iverson.
Man, he was Mark when I was a senior in high school, junior, senior in high school. He was playing at Georgetown. I mean, I remember AI from the. I mean, he was. I remember. Funny story. When I was senior in high school, I'm cutting weight, so I didn't trust myself to do much. I'd like go to wrestling practice, go work out, come home, and I would watch a ton of college basketball, like a ton. This is the 93-94 season. Glenn Robinson at Purdue, Grant Hill at Duke, Allen Iverson at Georgetown. I had never heard of Allen Iverson ever, but that year, I mean, he was on like ESPN. It was called Big Monday. He was on all the time with Georgetown, and I fell in love with him. I mean, I loved AI. He was at, Ray Allen was at Connecticut. I mean, it was just, it was good stuff. So are you obviously you're a Philly sports fan? Those are your favorite teams? Eagles, your favorite team?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any, how you feeling about the Eagles as we get ready to head into postseason?
Not good. It's not good. I'm a little down on them, but I think they'll figure it out. It kind of reminds me of the Steelers a few years ago when I think they were 11-1 and maybe ended like 12-5 or something
Okay.
the year. It reminds me of that. And so, I'm hoping all of our chips come together and we can make it a memorable postseason. I'm not like I like the Eagles, but it's not gonna be the end of the world if they end up losing or something. Like I like the Eagles, but I'm hoping, we can, make it to like a NFC championship or something. That'd be cool.
Well, Mark, this has been a lot of fun. Super grateful for the time, getting some of your comments, and I hope we can do this again sometime because it's been a lot of fun, but thank you so much.
Heck yeah, man. No problem. Thank you for having me.